Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Fry. On this episode, we have interviews from the British Columbia Construction Safety Alliance's 2023 Health and Safety Conference, including BCCSA President Mike McKenna. But first, here's a summary of the latest Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce headlines. Daily Commercial News staff writer Angela Gismondi has a story about how off-site construction is a needed tool in addressing the housing crisis. Albert Bendersky of BECC Modular spoke at a panel discussion at the Residential Construction Council's Housing Summit, held virtually, and spoke about the 4 S's for building, which include speed, sustainability, safety, and selection, and the 4 P's, which include predictability, precision, productivity, and preparedness. Standard Paving Limited has been fined $17,500 by the Ontario Court of Justice at Kingston for applying a facsimile of a professional engineer's seal to design drawings without the knowledge or consent of the professional engineer. The Nova Scotia Corporation performs general contracting and construction services. And extra incentives through the WSIB's Health and Safety Excellence Program, announced in June 2022, are being extended through the end of 2024. The move means smaller businesses with up to 99 full-time employees can earn double the rebates in both 2023 and 2024 and receive $1,000 towards their health and safety plan in 2023 and 2024. The Massey Tunnel procurement process is moving forward. 3 teams have been selected to move to the request for proposal stage to create an immersed 8-lane tube tunnel to replace the current aging infrastructure. The teams are Cross Fraser Partnership, Daewoo-GS JV, and Fraser River Tunnel Constructors. Following the evaluation of submissions to the request for proposals, the province will choose the project's design-build team with an anticipated start date of spring 2024. The first of 2 tunnel boring machines on the Broadway Subway project has broken ground at the future Oak VGH SkyTrain station in Vancouver. The machine, named Phyllis, reached the 4th of 6 underground stations, excavating more than 2 kilometers of tunnel and installing approximately 1,330 concrete tunnel liner rings since departing from Great Northern Way Emily Carr Station in fall 2022. And the Vancouver Regional Construction Association recently held its annual Awards of Excellence, and we have all the coverage of the event on the Journal of Commerce, as well as on the previous podcast where I interviewed VRCA President Jeannie Martin. And now, here's our coverage from the BCCSA Health and Safety Conference. I'm here with
Mike McKenna, Executive Director of the British Columbia Construction Safety Alliance.
And we're here at the BCCSA's Health and Safety Conference. This is the second one since COVID, so maybe we could talk about, the conference itself. Let's start with what's on offer here for this conference.
Yeah, so basically what we're doing here today is we're trying to provide an opportunity for health and safety professionals to get together. And oftentimes with these events, the content's good, but it's what happens between the events.
Like we're doing now.
Like we're doing now. That you see the real benefit. And I think the goal for me is that at the end of this, if people leave saying either I made a good connection or I learned or I'm going to do something different on Monday than I did on Wednesday before I left work, I think that's a success for us. Yeah.
And one of the things you mentioned, and I think others mentioned too, is January 1st, 2024. Maybe, I'm sure some people know why that's an important date in BC, but not everybody does, so maybe tell why that's important.
Yeah. So January 1st, 2024 is a really important date for the construction sector here in British Columbia from a safety perspective, because if you pump concrete, you won't be able to pump concrete if you're not certified through the BCCSA and WorkSafe BC. And that's a big thing because nothing gets built in the province without concrete.
Right.
And nothing gets built without concrete. Nothing gets built with concrete without a pump. And so it's really important that the industry embraces this. And it's really important that those folks, if you do pump concrete, get certified. It's a very dangerous occupation. And when things go wrong with a concrete pump, they really go wrong. And it's generally not the concrete pump operator that actually has the issue. It's the workers around when the concrete pump either tips over or there's some air in the line and the person at the end at the end of the line gets whipped about. So that's a really important deadline. And then the other one is asbestos certification. So if you're an asbestos abatement contractor, you have to be licensed through WorkSafe BC. We don't have anything to do with that or the BCCSA. But if you're a worker in the construction sector that touches asbestos, you also have to be certified. And there's a 3-part process that consists of training, and then there's an actual competency assessment. So you're not deemed, but you actually have to prove to somebody who's an expert in the asbestos field that you know what you're doing. And then you have to do a written exam at the end. So it's a 3-part process. But again, if you're not certified by January 1st, 2024, it's a problem for employers because they won't be able to they won't be able to do the work without the work. So it's a problem for workers because you don't get paid if you don't work. And if you're not certified and you work in asbestos, you're not going to get paid. So.
And I just recently talked to Chris Gardner of the ICBA, and he was talking about how mental health, amongst other things, amongst diabetes and other things, is raising rates for benefits, which they have to worry about, of course. But he also said he's working with you guys, and you've done the Lone Hunter series. Maybe you give us a rundown on how mental health, which seems to be more in focus now, is being looked at.
Yeah, mental health is really important, particularly in this industry, because traditionally the joke was that supervisors yelled at their workers because they cared. And that works with some people, but what we're seeing today is that mental health is a real issue, not just in construction, but societally, generally. But for an industry that's trying to attract young people, that's trying to keep its people, we've done several studies. We've worked with the ICBA. The Lone Hunter series is also very, very valuable. But the research that we did, which I think really needs to be looked at by owners, is that most construction workers don't feel like they have any agency.
Right.
So the typical cycle is you get hired on for a 1 year, 2, 3, 4-year project, but there's no certainty. At the end of that project, you do well, and then you're looking for the next job. Sometimes you get kept on, depending on the size of the company. But you can imagine that that's a real stressor for folks, right? That there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to pay their rent, pay their mortgage. So I think as an industry, what we're seeing, if we want to improve mental health, we've got to improve how we treat workers. And generally, workers are treated well, but that consistency, that approach, it's really going to be a sea change. Will it happen? I hope so, but it's going to take a little bit of time. But mental health is something that we're all talking about, and particularly in the construction sector. If we're trying to attract people, we better be a place that people feel that they're psychologically safe to be in.
Besides mental health, over the past year, since the last time we did this in person, which we didn't do before COVID, or during COVID, what have you seen as good and bad trends in terms of safety in BC or otherwise?
Yeah, so good and bad trends. So I mean, there's always the typical bad trends. Like we said, the mental health crisis is one of those. But I think what we're seeing on the positive side is this is an industry that, as I said at the podium, $22 billion worth of investment and productivity from a GDP perspective. 9% of the GDP is coming from the construction sector. That's a really good news story, right? The challenge that we're going to have is that how do you populate and how do you attract workers to get all that work done?
Right, of course.
So it's an interesting kind of chicken and egg thing, because we have the work, but we don't necessarily have the workers, and we've got to change our perspective on sort of how we treat those workers. So good news is lots of work. Bad news is not a lot of workers to do the work. So I'd say that would be probably the biggest things.
And up next, we have safety expert Michael Fears, who spoke at the BCCA Health and Safety Conference about safety culture and how it can be changed.
I'm here with
Mike Fears.
And Mike Fears, and maybe you should tell us what you do.
I'm a health and safety senior manager with a national engineering firm. I'm also a instructor at the University of Calgary in the continuing education department, health and safety and environment. And I sit on a committee with the Board of Canadian Registered Safety Professionals.
During your talk today at the BCCSA's Health and Safety Conference, you explained, and I'm really boiling it down to a simplest form, but that the reward culture we have right now isn't working, basically, or it's kind of working, but not in the ways it should be. It's a little too short term. Instead of me putting words in your mouth, maybe you should explain what you meant by that.
Yeah, in general, my experience over the last 20 plus years in safety, as well as a lot of talks I've had with senior managers, both in operational and safety side of things, as well as junior people, I found what we try to do with safety rewards just isn't as effective as it should be. Part of that has to do with we treat safety rewards as a quick solution, and I think we make some assumptions which are not necessarily based in good practical experience. Now, we do know from recent insights in psychology and some work done in the health and safety field that there are alternative approaches. The question is, how do we make them work within the context of our individual organizations? And so my thinking is to go away from what we call the external reward focus. Where,
extrinsic, I think.
the extrinsic motivations. So you put in so many near misses, you get a points to go into a safety store. So you can buy your fishing gear, whatever it is that you want.
Yeah.
If there's something there that you want, which is also another problem. We go away from that sort of thing to focusing more on the intrinsic motivation. So rather than people doing safety because they get a trinket for it, let's do safety because it's a good thing and it's part of how they do business. And I think what we've done with the safety rewards program is we've created safety within an organization to be something different rather than something as part of what we do. And you do see occasionally rewards for maybe hitting quality targets in some industries, but I've yet to see anybody get rewards for clocking in on time, filling out their expense reports on time. And that was one of the first things I noticed with when we were dealing with implementing a safety rewards program in one organization. Management's original response was, why should I pay or give something to somebody for doing what I'm already paying them to do? And that's a valid concern, right? Now, having said that, sometimes we ask people to juggle conflicting priorities, production versus safety, and that happens daily, all the time. And so what can we do to kind of, where appropriate, have them make those safer choices rather than riskier choices?
You also pointed out that I'm sure this isn't rampant or anything, but it can be abused where somebody injures themselves and they don't report it because then they can't get the points.
In fact, that's a huge issue. In fact, right after my talk, I had somebody come up to me and they'd worked for a major, large international oil and gas outfit, which is renowned for being very, very safe. And he said they hid stuff all the time. He said, you go in the bathroom, you find blood on the sinks and things like that. And
it's not great.
And I've seen it myself, right? People break bones and they hide it. People get ill, they hide it. And it's, every time if we adopt a posture of, we can always have zero incidents, or zero is not just, a target or goal, but it's like how we're going to function, then the very strong pressure not to report things, which is really, really bad because you end up with situations where, you aren't recognizing the errors that are popping up. Like a very good example was, and you can find this on the WorkSafe BC website, one of their incident summaries. There was a company that did a very dangerous kind of thing, very regular. They had lots of controls in place and so on and so forth. And they had multiple near misses, alarms going off, all sorts of other things, but nothing bad happened. And then they ended up having something bad 11 years in the past, but it didn't cause any major loss to the company. And so they went on 11 years and they did this activity about 100,000 times a year. And so, clock in 11 years, 1.1 million times. And
law of averages means something's going to happen.
And so if I told somebody, it's 1 in a million chance, I'm willing to take that risk, right? That's, the incident resulted in somebody disfigured for life, several months in a burn ward in Vancouver. A gentleman who's responding had a heart attack. We had a fire it took 3 days to put out. We had to bring specialty equipment in from Grand Prairie. And I think the total cost in the rebuild was around $40 to $60 million, plus all the reputation
of course,
everything else. So $200,000 fine from WorkSafe BC. But they there was that, people didn't report. And there's some discussion as to how it happened. It was very interesting though, as the fact that they weren't reporting meant that it looked like low incidents. That was good. And some of the people involved in this particular incident were safety champions as a result, right? But they were working in the context they report, they'll just get into trouble. Even if they did report, things weren't being fixed.
In fact, you even pointed out that terms like safety champions is counterproductive in some ways.
It can be, yeah. And it creates a false sense. I remember once I did do an investigation of a gentleman or of an incident. Turns out the supervisor had just literally been on the front cover as a safety champion for something, and it turns out talking to the staff during the investigation, he was anything but.
Okay.
I'm not too sure how he even got into that role, but what he did was a contributing factor. But it was quite shocking to see that, and it was a tough thing to convince management. We literally had to have all the data to put on the table to convince the managers. Yeah, this safety champion wasn't the great, and of course it gives a really bad impression to the staff. They're no different.
Right.
And so it's but he checked all the boxes. No incidents, this, that, everything else. And you can't win the lottery every day.
No. You also said, like, you point out the intrinsic way to go about things, which it's not get rid of rewards because they are valuable, but there are different rewards to give and different ways to give them, basically.
Yeah, I think the first thing to do is to recognize when people do well or improve. That's the key, because it's always about improvement. And you do that without a reward. Yeah. That's what the literature tells us, pat on the back, stroke the ego, thanks for the effort, I really see you, so on and so forth. And then if that continues or it blossoms, including other activity behaviors, then you find a reward that person would like. Now, it could be as simple as they like Starbucks, you get them a Starbucks gift card. Great, right? And you do that, hopefully in a public context, so everybody can kind of.
But not always, you pointed out.
Not always.
Some people don't want that.
Some people don't want that. Some people, they want it behind closed doors and everything else. And the, but you want to see that improvement over time, right? And now it could be improvement happens instantly, it goes on for a while, and then it drops off, right? Or maybe it's another. Hey, I see you're doing this, or what happened, and nudge. So it's very contextual by the individual, but I think that's the way we do it. We look at, what do we want to reinforce? How do we, just when people are doing that, how do we, give them the ego stroke, the pat, hey, good job, and then reinforce that with that reward or whatever it happens to be.
And this might be me interpreting what you said, but it seemed to me you were saying to management, don't make a big deal of this, because that's actually counterproductive too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because you want to treat it as if it is just a normal part of business. Safety is just what we do. It's no different than getting your timesheets on time, making sure that our drawings are in to the constructors on time, and so on and so forth. Right. So don't make a big deal about it. No bells and whistles, and it just becomes what people do, and that's it. And that starts becoming who they are as an organization, as a group, and that helps.
And you also mentioned HOP. I'm going to leave it to the lapsed epidemic, as you call it yourself, to explain what that is.
So it's a collection of different authors and researchers in the health and safety world, and it's known by a number of different things. Safety 2, Safety Differently, New View of Safety. It is collectively known as human and organizational performance. And there's different variations of the key principles, but they basically roll down to error is normal. So it's just, human beings operate in conditions of uncertainty, and that's just the way it is. So not everything is perfect. Yeah. The second one is blame fixes nothing. So in addition to kind of traditional ways of, we always blame the worker if something goes wrong, retrain them, that sort of thing, which is not necessarily been my experience, but I understand it is other people who experience it. And why should we blame them if we're working in an error-filled environment? And then the third principle, context drives behavior, which is really key, because people are doing the things they're doing because of the situation and the environment they're in, which is possibly very error-laden and maybe conflict. So how can you blame them for in some cases, the context and the situation you put them in?
Yeah.
The fourth one is learning and is vital. And so, when you have an error, are we going to, learn from it and correct and make sure that we're okay, versus let's just blame somebody and move on, nothing to see here. We're perfect. That guy was not good. And then, of course, I think a key one is leadership response matters. And I'm not a big fan of leadership and things like that, but at the end of the day, how an organization and the people running the organization respond to incidents, problems, initiatives really makes a huge difference.
And finally, if people are interested in finding out more, and I would assume people at this conference and otherwise would be, where would they go to find this information?
Well, for the HOP literature, certainly there's really good resources at Energy Safety Canada. Okay. Their website, they've got a dedicated spot to that, and they run little seminars and things like that on these sorts of things. I'm hoping to produce my slides and presentation on my LinkedIn, and it's got literally 3 whole slides in very small font of everything from the psychology literature to the main things on HOP as well. So they take a peek at my LinkedIn.
Sounds good. And we can put a link in the show notes. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Oh, no problem.
And that's it for this episode of the Construction Record Podcast. You can listen to us on Amazon Music, Apple Music, and Spotify, as well as on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.